everybody, my name is Erin Durant and I am a 4-H and Family and Consumer Science Extension Agent with Colorado State University Extension in Gunnison County. And today I'll be demonstrating how to make Arroz con Pollo, or chicken with rice. This is a traditional dish of Spain and Latin America, but the recipe may vary slightly by country or region. The recipe serves 9, but if you have a ton left over, this recipe does freeze really well, or you can cut the recipe in half to serve fewer people. So what you'll need today are 4 skinless, boneless chicken breast halves, which is about 1.2 pounds. I went ahead and chopped up my chicken and sprinkled it with a 1/4 teaspoon salt. You'll need a 1/2 teaspoon salt total for the whole recipe. A 1/4 teaspoon will go on your chicken, and you'll use a 1/4 teaspoon later in the recipe. You'll also need 1 cup of frozen green bell pepper. We didn't actually have frozen bell pepper at my grocery store, so I just bought 1 fresh green bell pepper and chopped it up myself. You'll need 1 cup of onion pearls or 1 medium onion diced. I went ahead and diced up my onion because I didn't want to cry in front of the camera, and I'm glad that I did because it was a very strong onion and I did cry a little bit. 1½ teaspoons of minced garlic, which I went ahead and minced. You could also use the minced garlic that comes in a jar and just measure it out from the jar. 1 cup of long grain white rice. I went ahead and measured that out. I'm just using jasmine rice today. 1 14½ ounce can of chicken broth. If you're on a low sodium diet, you can use the low or no sodium chicken broth instead of the regular chicken broth. 1/2 cup of white wine or white wine vinegar. I'll be using the vinegar today. 1 14½ ounce can of stewed tomatoes, and 1/2 teaspoon each of black pepper and paprika. I went ahead and mixed in my black pepper, paprika, and my remaining 1/4 teaspoon salt into this little bowl, since we'll be adding them all at the same time later in the recipe. So the first step with any recipe is always to wash your hands with warm water and soap. With this recipe, you also need to wash your hands again after you have chopped up the meat. Once you've done that, you can start heating up your skillet on medium heat. I'm also going to spray my skillet with a little bit of cooking spray because I'm not using a non-stick skillet. However, if you are using a non-stick skillet, you may not need to do this step. Once your skillet is hot, you can then add your chicken and begin cooking it. We're going to cook the chicken until it's golden and then remove it. We've cut our chicken up into small 1-inch chunks today because it will cook more quickly and evenly, which is always nice. And we're using all white chicken meat because it is leaner than its dark meat counterpart. However, this dish does traditionally use some dark meat. So if you want to use dark meat and you are less concerned about the additional fat, you can go ahead and use some skinless, boneless dark meat, or even a mix of the two. Whenever you're cooking chicken or any type of meat, it's always important to keep food safety in mind. The best way to test for doneness is to use a meat thermometer to make sure that food is reaching the correct minimum internal cooking temperature. For chicken, you want it to reach a minimum internal temperature of about 165 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a bigger concern with larger cuts of meat like whole chicken breasts or even a whole chicken, but definitely something to keep in mind. So we're just going to stir this chicken around and cook it until it's golden. Once your chicken starts to turn golden, I'm going to actually turn off my hot plate and remove my chicken from the skillet. Now that it's getting that golden touch on the outside, it's starting to smell really good. After you've removed your chicken, you're then going to saute your onions, green pepper, and garlic. I'm going to add a little bit more cooking spray to my skillet because I don't have much grease left in the pan after pulling my chicken out. But again, if you're using a non-stick skillet, that step might not be necessary. So go ahead and add your green pepper, your onions, and your garlic. And we're going to saute these veggies for about 5 minutes. So use a spoon, stir them around every so often. Again, you can kind of adjust the heat on your stove depending on how your stove operates. Some stoves run a little bit hotter, some stoves run a little bit colder, so find what works for you. I'm on about medium heat on this hot plate. And again, you want to kind of spread your veggies out so that they're in an even layer on the bottom of your skillet so that they're all cooking pretty evenly. You don't need to stir them constantly, just stir them occasionally to make sure they're all cooking evenly and aren't sticking to the bottom. I wish you could smell this because it's smelling really good. Again, you'll notice a lot of steam is coming up off of my skillet, so if you have a fan over your stove, you might want to turn that on at this point. And I'm just stirring my vegetables around occasionally to make sure they're in that nice, even layer on the bottom of the skillet. Give them maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. And again, I'm using a metal spoon for this part. If you want to use a spatula, a wooden spoon, really whatever tool you prefer. Alright, and mine are starting to look nice and done. My onions are kind of opaque. My peppers are a little bit darker green and softer. So I'm going to move on to the next step at this point. So now we're going to add our rice and cook until our rice is opaque, which should be about 1 or 2 minutes. So not very long. I'm going to turn my skillet down. That rice to start releasing some of the flavor and create a nice little toasty flavor to that rice. Alright, so when your rice starts to turn opaque, which mine is really about there already, you can then stir in your broth. Again, remember, if you are in a low sodium diet, you can use your low or no sodium chicken broth. So go ahead and stir that in. Or white wine or your white wine vinegar, a half a cup of that. There we go. Your tomatoes at this point. There we go. And then you're going to add your spices. So remember, I already combined mine in this little bowl, but this is a half a teaspoon of black pepper, a half a teaspoon of paprika, and the remaining 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're now going to return our skillet to a boil. So stir it around really good to make sure it's all combined. And then you may need to turn your heat up a little bit to bring it to a boil. All right, and once it reaches a boil, you can then turn your heat down so that it's just simmering. And we're going to set a timer for 20 minutes. We're just gonna let it sit and simmer for that full 20 minutes. While that simmers, I'm gonna go ahead and start cleaning up my kitchen so that when it's ready and it's time to eat, my kitchen is already mostly cleaned up and I can enjoy my meal without stressing about cleaning up the kitchen afterwards. Once your rice has simmered for 20 minutes, you can take off the lid and add your chicken back in. Mix everything together, and you want to let this cook now for about 5 more minutes or until your chicken is heated all the way through. Make sure you combine the chicken evenly with the rice and the veggies. You'll just turn that skillet down to low and let the chicken heat back up. Once that's done, that's it. You're finished. Time to sit down and enjoy this Arroz con Pollo meal. I hope